بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك وكرم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Alhamdulillah, it is truly a blessing to be here. Philly is really close to my heart. I became Muslim. I've always lived in South Jersey. I was born in Trenton, New Jersey. Grew up just not too far from Camden. So Philly, even prior to Islam, was a big part of my life. When I was very young, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia was a big part of my life, having sickle cell anemia. So I was always in Philly. It seems to be like a magnet for me. I feel at home when I come to Philly. And just to echo the sentiments of our beloved brother Ibrahim, mashallah, may Allah reward him and preserve him, and his blessed wife Hanan, that may Allah reward them both for this initiative. It's not easy to start things. It's not easy to build structures. Sometimes it's a lot easier to attach oneself to what's already going on, which in some ways limits the progression of future things that could go on if there was someone who can take up that mantle and build infrastructure. And many times we go to Muslim countries or more advanced kind of Muslim communities, and we say like, okay, this is really nice, it's really important, and it's like Imam Suduki was saying, it's an oasis. You feel like you're in the middle of the desert, and all of a sudden you have this one spot where everyone is just gathering and enjoying, and it's easy to admire that, but to build that, right? And sometimes we look at those communities and we see them divorced from their past. Right? In the past, they may have started with one person. It may have just been a small rented building. And I remember some of our teachers, they would come for classes at a local masjid, and no one would show up. So they would take kufis, they would take hats and line them up and still do the class, right? And these are the kind of intentions and the sincerity solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that led to those places being oases later on in life. But if we look at it with a present tense lens, and we don't see that this is the result of years and years of struggle and effort, then we may really miss the point. Right? So may Allah bless them, and may Allah increase this effort, inshallah. May Allah make us all grounded in these three beautiful principles. And this idea of being grounded, right, is directly a Qur'anic idea. Right? In the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that the parable of the good word, right, kalimatin tayyibatin, which here in this verse refers to La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Right, the example of that good word is like shajaratin tayyibatin, like a good tree. Right, asluha thabitun, its roots are deeply grounded. Right, wa far'uha fis sama, and then its branches reach into the heavens. Tu'ti ukuluha kulla hinin bi'idhni rabbiha. And it produces its fruits every season, right, by the permission of its Lord. And these are examples that we give for people so that they can think about it. And that is the reality, that the deeper that something is grounded, the deeper roots it has to the life-giving earth, right? The nutrients from that earth, it's being nourished from that earth. The higher and the more blessed the produce that's going to come from that, for people to take part in for years and years to come. And the idea of the tree is very much a parable or an example that's used in many of the prophetic hadith, many of the verses of the Qur'an. This idea of the tree, and you'll see a lot of the kind of Islamic institutions, they'll use the tree as their logo. Right, especially the olive tree, because the olive tree is mentioned in the Quran, watini wa zaytun. And the reason is because these things take a long time. Right, they started as a seed, right, but they were nourished and they were watched over day in and day out with consistency, with rain, sleet, or snow, right? Even if someone is sick, they still do it, right? Even if someone has a difficult situation, they still do it. And this is the fruits of these things, is these institutions and these oases that we have, and this prophetic inheritance that's still preserved on the backs of great righteous men and women, right, since the beginning. So it is a blessing to have anything to do with that treasure trove of inheritance from the Prophet ﷺ. Just to have any affiliation to that is just an absolute honor, and to be able to serve in that light is even more of an honor. But this idea of community and service and knowledge, one of our teachers was mentioning, and this was an issue that I dealt with when I first became Muslim, 15 years ago. Allahu Akbar, time goes fast. That there was always, and this is the beginning of YouTube. So YouTube just started at that time. This was just after MySpace. I don't know if you all remember MySpace. I might be dating myself right now. But just after MySpace, YouTube came in, and the Android phones came out, right? So there is a lot of access to knowledge that started at that time. Even more so now. Now it's you can on your phone, you have essentially a fully functioning computer on your phone right now. But access to knowledge before that was extremely different than after that. Once YouTube started, besides YouTube, it was like the Dean Show. It was like these one-off things that you could access once in a while. But I remember that knowing a lot of things, but not knowing that I know them right. Right? And this is the level of knowledge for most of us in America, that we have a lot of information. We've heard this from this sheikh, we've heard this from this teacher, we've heard this from this. But one of our teachers mentioned that to have your knowledge grounded, right? And this is a coincidence. I didn't prepare this. This is not choreographed. It was. I wish I was that good. But to have your knowledge grounded, and what he meant by that is that if you study a book with a teacher, first benefit is that you'll have knowledge. The second benefit is no matter what someone else tells you, you know what you know is right. And maybe they're right also. Maybe there's a difference of opinion or something, but you know at least what you know is right because you studied it with from a book, from a teacher. Right? There's that chain of transmission. So not only are you, because if it's just I heard this on a lecture or I read this in I forget which book, right? Then anytime someone says something different, it just becomes shaky. It's like, well, I'm not really sure anymore. Now I don't know what to think, right? But once a person is connected to that chain, right, then they have what they call grounded knowledge. They not only know, but they know that they know. They not only know, but they know what they know is right. And there's a funny story that the Arabs love to tell. It's about Thomas the doctor, right? Tuma al-Hakim. The original name for doctors in the past was al-Hakim. Right? Hakim technically means the wise one, right? And it's more of a traditional naturopathic type of medicine as opposed to today. But this person, Thomas, right, he was extremely intelligent, but he didn't have any teachers. All he had was books, right? So he self-studied, is what we will call it. He self-studied. And a patient came to him. It would be better if I had like something to write on, because I can show you what this means. But a patient came to him with a specific sickness, and Thomas, the doctor, treated him, and the patient died, right? And the other doctors are accusing him of murdering this guy. And he's like, no, I didn't murder him. I was treating him, but he died. So they asked him, what was the treatment? So he showed them from the books that he was reading that the treatment here is hayyatun sawda. Hayyatun sawda is a black snake, right? So he used the black snake to treat the guy and killed him. And the scholars are looking at him like, are you insane? It says habbatu sawda, black seeds. Right, but he switched the ba for he got one letter wrong and he killed the patient. And that is always used as a parable or as an example of the self-studied person. The person who went rogue, they want their own way towards knowledge, right? And this is the difference between information and true knowledge, between knowledge that is just, you can say, surface level knowledge and true understanding. And the word in the Qur'an that's more used, right, than the word ilm is fiqh, right? لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَفْقَهُونَ. And the word fiqh is understanding, right? It's not just having the knowledge, because someone could know something and not understand it. They're just a vessel that they're preserving that thing. Like I know a few lines of Shakespeare poems, but it doesn't mean I don't understand anything about Shakespeare, right? So there's a difference between knowledge that is just retained, right, and knowledge that is fully digested, right, and understood that it informs our practice, it informs our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it informs our beliefs and our dealings in the world. Like that is the knowledge that we want to tap into. And that's the knowledge that the Prophet ﷺ called beneficial knowledge. And he would seek refuge, the Prophet ﷺ would seek refuge from knowledge that does not benefit. Knowledge that does not benefit. Right? And there's many meanings to that. Right? One of the meanings is that knowledge that does not lead to acting upon it. Because someone can know the truth, but not act upon it themselves. And that knowledge does not benefit them on the Day of Judgment. It doesn't benefit them here. But also it informs our outward actions, but also our understanding of the religion as a whole, our outlook on the religion, which is really what tomorrow is about. And tomorrow is kind of setting the stage for future classes where we're going to go into the actual details of of actual daily practice of how do we do this, how do we do that. But I just wanted to kind of go over a little bit before my phone dies, the outline of what tomorrow is going to look like. And all of this is essentially based off of one prophetic narration. One of the blessed companions of the Prophet Umar ibn al-Khattab, who was later to be the second caliph to take control after the Prophet passing, after his passing, he narrates that they were sitting together in the masjid, and a person comes in that they don't have any knowledge of. They don't recognize this person. And we'll talk about this. I'm not going to mention all the details, but so this person comes and asks the Prophet ﷺ 4 questions, right? And these 4 questions at the end, the Prophet ﷺ said that was the angel Gabriel, and he asked those questions to teach you your religion, right? So the scholars, they understood that these 4 questions make the foundation of the religion of Islam. So the whole religion is seen. The whole religion is seen to be summarized in this one narration, and that's why they call this specific hadith, this prophetic narration, Sunnah, the mother of the Sunnah. And literally, if you translate it literally, means mother, but it also means the source, right? Because all of us, right, the source of all of us is our mothers. May Allah bless them. So this is the source of the Sunnah. I mean, it's the go-to hadith if you want to understand the macro picture of Islam, right? The big picture and the zoomed out overlook of Islam. You would go to this hadith. So the 4 questions were: what is Islam, right? What is submission, you could say? What is iman? What is faith? This third one would be: what is ihsan? Which is translated as what is excellence. But ihsan comes from the word hasan, which means beauty. And then the 4th question is the signs of the Day of Judgment. So that would be eschatology. The eschaton is the final hour. So these 4 questions make up the foundation of what the religion of Islam as a whole, in a macro sense, talk about. So yes, tomorrow is going to be pretty much each of those questions is going to have its own session. Right? And one session on each question is not even enough to do a drop in the ocean, because each one of these questions has been served as a full science in the religion, right, for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the first part, before jumping into that hadith, the first initial session, because there's 4 questions, there's 5 sessions. So the first session is just talking about how do we know what we know, or what are the source texts that that the Muslims base everything on, right? And obviously we know the answer to that, right? The Qur'an, the prophetic sunnah, the way of the Prophet ﷺ, the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ, right? And the teachings of the companions and the great scholars, who we would call the Salaf, right? The earliest generations. And we'll talk about the chain of transmission, the Sanad, the Abdullah bin Mubarak, one of the great second generation, who was a companion of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So he never met the Prophet ﷺ, but he was that generation just after them. He said that the al-isnadu min ad-din, that the chain of transmission is part of the religion. Right? وَلَوْلَا الْإِسْنَادُ لَقَالَ مَنْ شَاءَ مَا شَاءَ. And if it wasn't for that chain of transmission, then whoever wants to say something, they could say it. Anyone could make up anything about Islam. But if someone walked in here today and said something that is completely radically different than what we understood as Muslims, right, our first question is, who'd you get that from? Right? It's not just like, well, I don't believe you. Like, that doesn't matter. Whether I believe you or not, it doesn't matter. Who said it? Who before you said it? Right? Is it from Allah? Is it in the Qur'an? Is it from the Prophet ﷺ? Right? Is it in the prophetic narrations? Right? Is it from the companions of the Prophet ﷺ? Is it from that first generation right after the Prophet ﷺ, after the companions? Is it from the generation after that? Right? Who said it? Right? And if it doesn't have some sort of source in those early generations, it's very likely that that's not something that we would accept, right? Because the religion was already perfected and preserved at that time, and we're just maintaining its preservation. And there are certain things that have to be that are new in regards to law, right? Legal. There was no vending machines at that time. Right, so in the prophetic hadith, like when the Prophet ﷺ is explaining a valid business transaction, right, you would assume that there's 2 people and an item of sale, right? But when you walk up to a machine and you push buttons, right, who is the second person? You got the item of sale, you got the buyer, and you have this machine, right? Is there a proposal, an acceptance? Is there an agreement on a price? Right? So there's got to be a room for new rulings and new laws. And this is ifta, but the beliefs and the foundational understanding of the religion are already preserved from those very early generations. Right? Everything else is just outward practice. The second session is where we actually jump into the hadith. So we're going to read the hadith. We're going to talk about the chain of transmission of that hadith. Some of what we're mentioning today, I'll mention it tomorrow because there's some people that are not here yet. Then we'll go into the first of the 4 questions. So what is Islam? The science that was codified on the basis of that answer that the Prophet ﷺ gave to that question is called fiqh, right? Islamic jurisprudence, essentially. It's the rules of halal and haram. In the prophetic narrations, the Prophet ﷺ would say that the most knowledgeable of the companions in halal and haram is Abdullah bin Mas'ud, right? Or he would mention, so what does he mean by halal and haram? This is that science, the science of fiqh, right? Then the third, so now we're on the 4th session, which would be the second question, what is faith? The Prophet gave an answer, and from that answer, the scholars codified the science of aqidah, which is Islamic theology, essentially. Even though theology is only 1/3 of what aqidah really is, the study of God is 1/3 of that science, because it includes theology, prophetology, what we believe about the prophets, and eschatology, which is, or you could say, the belief in the unseen, what we believe about the unseen. And what we believe about the hereafter. And then the final question is, what is ihsan? What is excellence? And the answer of the Prophet ﷺ, from that, the scholars derived from the Qur'an directly and from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, the science of how to purify the heart. Which Allah says in the Qur'an that successful indeed is the one who purifies it. Right? And just like we have outward obligations, we have inward obligations, right? sincerity is an obligation of the religion. Just like we have outward sins that we have to leave, there are also inward sins that we have to leave. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that a person who has even a mustard seed of arrogance will not enter paradise, right, amongst those who enter first. So how do we understand that? How do we navigate that practice? We all have a learning curve when it comes to, okay, learning how to pray, learning the Arabic that's involved, learning how to fast, perhaps learning how to do Hajj, right, and going for Hajj for the first time. But the same kind of structure also applies to the heart. How do I acquire gratitude? How do I acquire patience? How do I acquire reliance on God? Right? And then in regards to the prohibitions, how do I remove hatred for people? How do I remove bad opinions and ill assumptions of other people? How do I remove ostentation, showing off? How do I get rid of those things? It's a science. Alhamdulillah, we have a treasure trove of books that have been written since the very beginning about how to diagnose these things, how to know if you have them, and how to remove them, right? And multiple ways of doing that, so that the heart is free from all of these diseases and healthy enough to know God. And that is really the goal, as the Prophet ﷺ said. And actually, this is a narration from Imam Ali, radiallahu anhu, the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. But some of the scholars of hadith said that it is actually a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But either way, the meaning is correct. That man amila bima alima warathahu Allahu ilman lam yakun ya'lam. Whoever acts upon what they know, Allah will bequeath them, Allah will give them knowledge they never knew before. Right, so that first knowledge is the outward knowledge. It's the knowledge that we learn from our teachers, back to their teachers, back to the Prophet ﷺ. And once we implement that, right, those actions have an effect on the hearts that leads to knowledge of God. Right? And that second type of knowledge is gifted. It's not, you can't find it in a book. You can read about God in the book, but truly knowing God is something that He gifts to people. He unveils to them. As He says in the Qur'an, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ. Have fear of Allah and Allah will teach you. Right? Allah's not going to teach you math, right? Or how to divvy up your inheritance. All that's in the Qur'an, right? That's not what this verse means. But it's an intimate knowledge of God. Right? It's an experiential knowledge. It's the difference between me telling you what this pomegranate tastes like and me giving you a taste. And that's the type of knowledge that is the result of implementing these three parts of the hadith of Jibril: Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. The fourth question, I don't know if we'll have time to go into it. It's an ocean in itself. The angel Gabriel asked the Prophet, what are the signs of the Day of Judgment? And he gives some of the signs. There is a whole session built out just for this. And alhamdulillah, the scholars also served that question and produced and codified another subject matter called fiqh al-tahawulat, the fiqh, or the understanding of changing times. What do we do when the signs of the end times start to happen one by one in front of our eyes? Right? The Prophet ﷺ, right, he mentioned certain things. This will happen, this will happen. And if this happens, then the Day of Judgment is soon to come after that. If this happened, then the Day of Judgment is soon to come after that. And many of those things, majority of the minor signs, all of them have already happened. Right? And the scholars have mentioned like every single one of them has already happened since centuries ago, some of them, and especially now in our times. Right? The Sahaba had no idea what it meant when the Prophet said that people, and near the end times, people will look to their hips to see what's going on at home. The Sahaba tried to understand it in their own mindset, but they're 1,400 years ago in the desert, right? There's only so much you could come up with. Like maybe it's a metaphor, maybe it's a parable for something else, right? But now, I mean, we know exactly what that means, right? You can go right to our hip, right? You can go to your wrist now, right? So that is an ocean in itself, and really the science there is knowing what stances are prophetic stances to take when things start going wrong, when the world starts changing, the structure of the world, whether it be politically, whether it be financially, whether it be the structure of the family, right, is completely different, whether it be the mindsets of people, whether it be certain things that were taken as a given before are now being challenged, right? Whatever it may be, that we have absolute clarity, right, even in the most confusing of situations, because we have this prophetic guidance to tap into, right? And so that is what we hope to do tomorrow in a nutshell. I really wanted to open this up for, I'm not really a fan of monologues, right? So if anyone has any questions or wants to throw anything in there, any food for thoughts that anyone wants to share, this would be a perfect time for that.
Please feel free to challenge anything that you hear.
Oh yeah, questions are not only are allowed, but invited, right? Because we really want to together come to a deep understanding of the Deen of Islam, and no one person is, right, infallible. Only the prophets, right? Only the prophets were divinely protected from mistakes and sin. So we really want to, and then everything is in sincerity. No one is trying to just argue. But even if there's a contentious point, right, please do not be afraid to bring it up, something that you've heard or something. And really the hope is that, right, if we know the answer, then we'll offer whatever we've learned. But if not, then we'll find the evidences together. We'll go look it up. Right? And maybe we'll even get in touch with some scholars, some senior scholars, and try to find the answer. And that's really the way the Sahaba were. Right? They didn't know the answer amongst themselves. They went straight to the Prophet. Right? And that's who we want to tap into the chain to figure out those things.